So it's interesting to note that I've seen and or talked about surrogacy in the last week or two, 3 times.
Wow.
It's a lot more than usual. I can't remember the last time I even heard someone talking about surrogacy. It doesn't come up a lot. Now, for parents listening, grandparents, I'm going to use words from health class, okay? So you just have to decide what you want to do with that. But I don't know how else to say some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into some of the ways I've seen this pop up in the news, because it's been in the news a lot, let's define it. Because Lauren and I were chatting about this, and the more I learn about it, I think there's actually more to it than I realize, and what surrogacy is in the modern world. So according to the government, who has this health website, essentially, I'd give you the address, but it'd be really boring for you. Surrogacy is of 2 types, traditional and gestational. Traditional surrogacy is the result of artificial insemination of the surrogate mother with the intended father's sperm, making her a genetic parent along with the intended father. Gestational surrogacy is defined as an arrangement in which an embryo from the intended parents or from a donated egg and sperm is transferred to the surrogate uterus. So in one case, in traditional, the surrogate actually has half the DNA of the baby. But contractually is how this works. There's contract and legal paperwork drawn up, and that person essentially adopts the baby before it's born, adopts out the baby to the parents. Now, according to this particular website, surrogacy practice has been referred to since antiquity. Babylonian law and customs allowed this practice to avoid otherwise inevitable divorce. The earliest known description of surrogacy is claimed to be the servant Hagar begetting a child from the childless Sarah through her husband Abraham, described in the book of Genesis. Are you all comfortable with that being surrogacy? Is that what that is?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but in effect it is. I mean, we just think of it as, well, it was a concubine or however you refer to it, but
I think a better way to describe that situation is a mess.
It's a total mess, but based on this medical definition, it does fit one of the definitions of surrogacy. They just didn't have the technology to do it
Right.
the less personal way.
Right.
How's that? In the Bible, it goes on to say Rachel asked her maid Bilhah to conceive a child with her husband Jacob. The concept of surrogacy is also found in Hindu mythology. We won't go into all those details, but it's there. It's been going on in the Middle Ages, blah, blah, blah. So it's been around for a long time. Now, it's popped up in the news where the Roman Catholic Church recently made a big announcement through Pope Francis. Pope Francis said on Monday this week, he called surrogate motherhood, quote, despicable as a practice, and that should be universally banned for its commercialization of pregnancy. And he included surrogacy in a speech about wars, terrorism, and threats to peace and humanity. He's like, I'm going to tell you all about these things that are a threat to the world today and a moral view of society. He included surrogacy in that. He says an unborn child must not be turned into an object of trafficking. He said, I consider despicable the practice of so-called surrogate motherhood, which represents a grave violation of the dignity of the woman and the child based on the exploitation of situations of the mother's material needs. And I don't know if you know this, it's already illegal in some countries. You know that?
No, I didn't know that.
It's illegal in Italy. No surprise. That's where Vatican City is its own little country inside of it. It's got restrictions in Europe. The United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Portugal, and several other nations allow surrogacy under certain conditions. Paid surrogacy is legal in some European nations, including Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus, which are not European nations. I'm not sure why the New York Times decided to put that in there. Surrogate mothers in the U.S. and Canada are often hired by Europeans. You know that? I didn't know that. Including same-sex couples seeking to have children through some American states, though some American states have outlawed the practice. And then I saw an interesting article this week from the Institute for Family Studies, and it was a lawyer who was writing. He had a hard time writing for non-lawyers, but he did his best. And essentially, here's his problem. He's like, listen, we have to be against surrogacy or dramatic restriction of surrogacy in America as Christians. because it changes how parenthood is established. He thinks that really we should, and this is my summary of his thoughts, you can go check it out for yourself, but he really thinks parents ought to be identified through genetics in traditional means of birthing a child. And the minute you begin doing legal contracts through surrogacy, you're allowing the state to establish parental rights. And he's like, that's a dangerous precedent. We shouldn't be doing that.
So then what's adoption?
He thinks that's different somehow.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Adoption is there's no one to take the baby. And you're with surrogacy, you're basically forcing an adoption.
I see.
That's a good way to put it. Thank you, Daria. And then I personally encountered this topic. I'm going to be as generic as possible because I don't want to, throw people's business out there. But I've got, let's just call it a couple friend somewhere in America. She went through cancer treatment in her 30s, is unable to have children on her own because of said cancer treatment.
Mm-hmm.
They want to have children. And they have decided to go through an agency, a surrogacy agency. And were even able, they're followers of Jesus, they were even able to find a Christian surrogate. And in this particular situation, both the couple and the surrogate meet and they decide whether they want to enter into this legal partnership. But all sides are believers. And the surrogate they may or may not go with got into it because she's done it once before. And what she has done is she has seen how in her own friend's life, how incredible the experience was when all parties were doing it intentionally and had all the paperwork in order. And this couple was so touched by it. They needed this. They wanted it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do with surrogacy? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to share some thoughts on this. Should Christians be worried about this? Do we ban it, call it despicable, as some aspects of the Christian faith are saying? How do we handle it? 440-546-2255. Surrogacy not only popped up with some friends of mine somewhere in the country, Christian couple. They are unable to have their own children, are considering this. But it's also come up in the news. The Roman Catholic Church has called it a despicable practice that should be condemned and banned globally. The Institute for Family Studies is worried about surrogacy in America, thinking it may kind of degrade parenthood and cause problems for Christians in the future because parenting, then parenthood is defined by legal contract. And then I don't know. What do we do with surrogacy? Daria, do you have any thoughts on this for us?
Yeah, so I don't have anything like against surrogacy as a concept. And for your friends, I wish them the best with whatever they decide to do. But there are some, even though I don't think there's anything wrong with surrogacy itself, there are some ethical and moral dilemmas that come up, especially as more and more celebrities in recent years have been choosing to use surrogates. One big problem is that the wealthy tend to prey on low-income women. Sometimes even in other countries. I think Ukraine, they had a spike in surrogacy because you had desperate women that needed form of income when Russia invaded, and then it essentially turns into baby sale and baby trafficking in some cases. There's also been, I think it was one of the Kardashians had a baby via surrogacy, and afterwards she's like, this feels very transactional, like this just feels wrong, and that has raised some questions like, are we causing trauma to the baby because they don't know who their genetic mother is, they just know who carried them for 9 months. And then there's also been, I think it was one of the Jonas Brothers' wives, their baby was born like 3 months early. And so that has led to concerns, or basically what happened in that case was the mother's body realized that the baby was not her own genetic material and rejected it. Baby survived, but they were very, very premature. So there are, again, I don't have anything wrong with surrogacy itself, but there are some concerns with it.
Yeah.
Well, I can even add one more to that because surrogacy in the modern developed world, it may change in some parts of the world, but it's done through in vitro fertilization. And so that requires creating multiple embryos. And then you're always left with what do you do with the unused embryos? So there's that ethical dilemma.
Yeah, embryo adoption.
What's your take, Lauren? Do you have a problem in general? You want to ban it? What do you want to do with it?
I mean, before this conversation, I would have never thought it would have never come to my mind that surrogacy is bad. And I was actually kind of confused when we started talking about it
Really?
in preparation for this, that like, oh, I didn't even really realize people thought it was bad.
Tell me more about your ideas before we talked about it. What was your general thinking on surrogacy?
Yeah, my general thinking, other than people like, celebrities like the Kardashians who are just wanting to do it because they don't want to change their bodies, which that's vain and a whole different topic.
Right.
That's wrong.
So like Christians should not be doing it just to preserve their figure.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Totally agree,
That's
yeah.
silliness. But my general thought was, it's somebody who wants to have a baby of their own genetic makeup, but they aren't able to carry for some reason. Like maybe they have a hostile environment in their body to carry a baby. So that's what I thought it was. But I totally see what Daria's saying about people using it to prey on women or women who don't have as much money, thinking this is the only way that they can make money. And so they feel forced to do it.
So in that sense, it really, done in that mode where it's a poor woman who's essentially renting her uterus because she needs money, that should be problematic.
Yeah, I think so.
For a believer. Ron, where are you going?
I don't know. I would have to do some more deep thinking on this, but is it wrong? That's a skill and a talent that she has, having a uterus. It's something I don't do. I can't do.
I can't either.
So, there's artists, there's, chefs. She's a uterus. I hope she's more than that, but
well, because you donate your plasma,
right?
Much less intrusive and a quicker process. But
Yeah, but I get paid to donate plasma. So that's
so you
one thing.
sell your plasma.
Yep, sell my blood for profit.
No, but in fairness to
Blood
Lauren
money.
and Daria, the women in the room, that's very different than
Yes.
carrying a child.
Yeah.
It seems like it is, Lauren.
Yes.
You sure?
Positive.
Okay.
I've done both. But I just think I feel like what he said about it's like takes away whatever of parenthood. What did he say? Takes away like the.
Well, the lawyer from the Institute for Family Studies is concerned it's going to muddy the waters in courts in the country about how to define parenthood. As in, let's just make it all legally a legal transaction versus genetics being the primary mode.
Okay.
Does that concern you?
Not really. I don't think so. I don't know if that's really concerning to me.
Why not?
Because if you're going to go to court with someone over a child because you had a surrogacy, I'm hoping that you're doing this. If you're going to choose to do this, there is something that shows you're adopting this child and that it's legal. You're doing it legally with an agreement with the other party. It gets concerning when there isn't an agreement with the other party, like if you're like women in third world countries who are just being bought to do this.
Well, there's been strange cases around the country where there are lawsuits done. There's already legal paperwork drawn up, but then a judge decides who the parents are. And this is particularly tricky when you're in a situation where, again, there's two basic types of surrogacy. One being the intended parents use their genetic material, and they're renting a uterus, essentially. Not renting, but they're using someone else's uterus. And the other one, sometimes women are not able to give birth for a variety of reasons or produce an egg for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And so the egg is either donated or the surrogate's egg is used.
Yeah, I feel like if my sister, what's different is if my sister and her husband were not able to, if my sister could not carry children, but she desperately wanted a child of her and her husband's genetics, I would feel okay carrying her child as a surrogate.
And I think that's the best case scenario is if you can keep it in the family like that.
Yeah, or it's like, or if it's your friend or like someone you know that like, my best friend can't have her baby, like can't carry her own babies, but she desperately wants babies. And I am willing and ready to carry another child, go through another pregnancy. I'm fully aware. I don't think this should be someone who's never gone through pregnancy before, to be frank, having gone through 2, 3.
Why is that? Just because it's such a...
Yes.
It wreaks havoc on your body.
It wreaks havoc on your body. Like, do you know how long it takes to recover your body? Not just like physically what it looks like, but like inside your hair, what your hair changes, your body changes, your skin changes. And so like, I think it should be someone who knows in full what it means to be pregnant and what it means, what your body does once you have a baby and the connection that you have and that you're giving that up. I don't think it should just be like some young person who's never had a baby and is just trying to make some money.
Yeah, that's definitely problematic, right?
I feel
Like
like
a college student wants to pay for college.
Yeah, I feel like it needs to be someone who you're doing it in full awareness because you desperately also want this person to have a baby, and you're willing and able to carry a baby.
Well, and one aspect I haven't seen much writing about, but I just wonder about the experience for the surrogate. Like, is there an emotional attachment in some way, even if it's not your genetics?
Oh, yeah. You feel it kicking
You think
around
so?
in your body for 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
You have a connection with that baby. Absolutely.
And so there's some sort of emotional trauma going on there.
Yes.
But let me throw a twist in. Ron would remember years ago we had a guest on regularly from the Center for Bioethics and Human Dignity, Paige Cunningham.
Yep.
It's I believe it's at Wheaton College in Illinois is where that's centered. It's a Christian bioethics organization. I thought, wonder if they've written about this. And they have. And they kind of add a third layer of types of surrogacy to this. Check it out. She writes this: a pastor confided that an infertile couple in their home group was expecting a baby through a surrogate, the wife's mother. Another couple who had come to terms with the wife's inability to carry a child to term were considering adoption, that is, until a church member offered to gestate the baby for them. When I polled a group of college students about surrogacy, a few were opposed to surrogacy in general, but said they might consider, get this, Lauren, being a gestational surrogate for a sister. That's what you said. Mm-hmm. In any case, these are not wombs for hire, which may admit a somewhat more straightforward ethical analysis. Instead, we're confronted with altruistic surrogacy, is what she calls it, where the relationship and not financial consideration is clearly the core motivator. Is this a relevant ethical distinction? Isn't altruistic surrogacy different in kind from the commercial version? She said the most obvious difference is that the commercial surrogate is most likely a stranger. The future parents would never talk to her or even know her name. One UK couple said, she's doing a job for us. We don't need to see her. I don't like that attitude. Blech. A second difference is that altruistic surrogacy and surrogates who carry the child or children in her womb is not compensated for her time and labor. Although her medical and out-of-pocket expenses may be covered by the intended parents, and I would say almost always would be, she doesn't receive compensation for her time or rent, I guess. Yeah. Commercial surrogacy presents the potential for dehumanizing of a woman in a way that altruistic surrogacy should not. I believe that these are distinctions worth an ethically dispositive difference. Daria, what do you make of this? Because I know you were very concerned about surrogacy, rightfully so, being someone taking advantage of the poor. But now do we have a new twist for you?
Yeah, no, this is something entirely different. I do still have some concerns, though, like with potential health issues, with introducing brand new genetic material to someone else's body, or the trauma that a baby might go through, which is different than adoption, because that's a baby that's been born that needs a family. This is like, from the onset, this baby is going to be separated from someone who held them in them for 9 months. I'm not against surrogacy, and I think if you're going to do it, this is probably the best case scenario, is if it's someone that you know and love.
What about the church member scenario? What if somebody at the church you're going to offered to do it in an altruistic way, if you needed that?
I think that's a beautiful picture of the love of Jesus.
And yet, there's going to have to be in vitro fertilization, so we're still going to have to deal with another ethical dilemma with embryos, right?
I've heard some Christians get around this by only, they'll have the clinic make exactly the number of embryos that they want to have implanted, so there aren't any leftovers, because otherwise they go into, there was a story recently where a 30-year-old embryo was born.
Mm-hmm.
So how old's that kid?
That's a good question.
Yeah, this is why I always get concerned when I see someone offhandedly condemning something holistically. There's obviously some things that should be condemned holistically, but this is much more nuanced than I realized. Like, I was generally kind of against the practice until I had a conversation with a friend. I wasn't like decided by any means, but I was like, she can't have children because of a disease she had. That's terrible. You want kids. You found an organization. You found another Christian. It's legally binding. I don't know. I don't really have a problem with that. Ron?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. All the way around, everybody understands the situation. But there are things that, like Daria had mentioned, the one where the body eventually realized, whoa, this is not my genetic material. I'm going to boot it. And the baby's born premature. And then premature babies are likely or more likely to have health issues that carry on. And then who becomes, do you sue the surrogate and say, well, if you had held that baby in longer, then they would have been healthy. And there's a lot of issues like that could come up.
Well, I think another layer that I wonder about is for most of human history, if you were unable to conceive, you ultimately determined that God's call in your life was not to have children. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What happens with that now? Because we can doesn't mean we should.
I think that's between you and God.
What if I got a friend that does it, Daria, and I'm not certain that they're listening to God on this? Is that my business?
It's not. That is, you don't know how God's going to speak to them. And maybe they ignored him, but that doesn't mean something beautiful can't still come out of it, because even though Abraham and Sarah ignored God's plan for what would be Sarah's child, he still blessed Ishmael.
Are you with that, Lauren?
Yeah.
Huh. It's fascinating. I think there's so many ethical dilemmas that come in with modern technology in general, but this one's one we got to be careful with, I think. Yeah.
We have a couple of texts coming in, all saying, but is that going against God's will because this person couldn't have children? Right. God's not going to, even if you implant it in somebody else, if God doesn't want these people to have children, he's not going to let people have children. Like if my sister implants her egg into me, if God doesn't want her to have children, it's like he still allows the womb to create it or not.
Oh, I see. You're saying God's sovereignty is not somehow erased by modern technology.
Yes.
But are we perhaps pushing the limits of submitting to his will in some sense?
I think if you have exhausted all of your, all the things that you can try, you've tried naturally, you've maybe for some reason you can't adopt or whatever. It's very, very expensive to adopt. So, okay. And this is the option for you and it works out. I think it's okay.
Yeah. And, some people are mentioning adoption as well, which is certainly something important, but somewhat a separate conversation, because here's the challenge. Yeah. If you want to adopt versus do in vitro on your own versus be hire a surrogate, the cost is pretty negligible. It's
my God.
By the way, outrageously expensive.
It's just all bad.
So I don't know that changes a whole lot. And you, of course, have the opposite in terms of seeing God's will in play. We had some dear friends of ours years ago. They had their 5th child, and they're like, okay, that's all we can handle. He got a vasectomy. Sorry, parents, you'll have to explain that one. And he did not do a follow-up exam.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
They met us at a park about 2-3 months later and said, oh, well, we're having 6, actually.
God does not care about modern medicine.
And that was one of those where it absolutely was solidified for me. It's like this couple tried to say, no, we're done, God. And he goes, ha ha, no, you're not. I don't think he laughed like that, but you know what I mean.